this is part of a process, I say the village plan process, where we're actually trying to work ways in which local communities, and these local communities have been self-identifying. People were asked in our original all-in-one to say, where do you live? And a lot of people said East Twickenham. And so we're developing a village plan, a village outlook for East Twickenham, which hopefully people in East Twickenham will be able to design and feel they have a part in designing. And we're moving on the next stage to actually embed some of those views in the statutory planning documents of the council, so we can protect the character of communities. It's not a quiz show. It's a bit like, we're not claiming that we know everything. I hate politicians who claim they know everything. If I don't know something, I'll say I don't know. And you know far more about East Twickenham than I ever will, although I have a colleague, I've got on my colleague, we have one of your councillors here, Councillor Susan Chappell, who is local. She'll be answering questions on voluntary sector, community and planning. Pamela Fleming, responsible for the environment, and she will be answering questions on the environment. Councillor Stephen Speak is responsible for highways and transport and deal with roads and cycling and so on. And my colleague Paul Hodgins, who is a cyclist, but he's actually a cabinet member for Children's Services and Schools, and he'll try his best to answer questions and concerns you have on education and schools. And you can all chuck bricks at me whenever you like, because that's what we're here for. So I will shut up. It's going to be like question time. Kieran White has very kindly come to act as independent chairman. Will ensure fairness in time, and I hope fairness in the conduct of it. We've had no say in choosing the questions. A set of pre-submitted questions, then we'll have open questions, but like the question time process. But I hope we all go away having learned a lot. Not here to teach or tell. Well, we'll try to answer questions to the best of my ability. We're here to learn and listen. So, Kieran, over to you, and now you're in charge. Your main job is to tell me to shut up and don't talk too much.
Well, many thanks. I hope I won't have to do that too much this evening. A very warm welcome from me. It's my pleasure to chair this evening's events. A little bit of background on myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I employ people. I'm a proud resident of Richmond with 2 children who attend the Vineyard School at the top of the hill. I know a number of people from here attend. I have been involved in a number of local issues and set up a Richmond residents group across the bridge with a number of us that were involved in some of the planning conversations that happened over the last few years. And I have been involved with the council by chairing some of the local strategic partnership events over the last couple of years. So I've got hopefully a reasonable view of the council as well as of the local area. My role as independent chairman is, as Lord True says, is to try and keep us all to order. So with your help, I hope that I'm able to do that. Mainly to make sure we stick to time this evening, to make sure we all get away at 8:30 this evening. So that's certainly the plan. But the most important part is to ensure that you all have a chance to have your say. So we'll be spending all of tonight hearing from you and then the councillors here on the panel. There's only one sort of, I guess, restriction on this evening, and that's that the questions need to be related to East Twickenham, please. So I'm sure that's something that you're here for, so I'm sure I won't have too much difficulty ensuring that that's the case. In terms of the order of this evening, if you are speaking or asking a question, please can you make sure you have the microphone that will be travelling around and hold it. We're recording this evening, so that's helpful for you to be able to speak into the microphone, and of course it will mean that everybody can hear your point as well. So please, if you could do that, that would be very good. It falls on me to tell you about the exits and toilets. So there are toilets just the other side of this wall, so please leave by the back door should you need to use the facilities, and the exit, as you can see, is right there should we need to leave. And could I ask you to put your mobiles onto silent if you haven't already? Thank you. Thank you, panel. There's a sign-in sheet that's going to be making its way round as well. If you could please just add your name to that list. And if you want to be kept in touch with the follow-up to these and other issues from the council that relate to this, then please let us know on that sheet to make sure you're involved in that.
And just make clear for the avoidance of doubt, that's not a political sheet, it's council, it has nothing to do with any political party.
Great stuff. So, for the first part of this evening, we have the first hour set aside to discuss the pre-submitted questions. There are 6 of those which we are going to hear. Each of the questioners, the people that pose those, will be asked to pose their question. The panel will then be invited to respond, and the questioner will have one follow-up question, question of clarity, supplementary question if they wish to. I've been told I've got to keep it 8 minutes per question, so I'll be certainly doing that. If there's time to bring other points in from the floor, we'll certainly be hearing from you, and then we've got a whole second hour where we'll be throwing it open to all of you to raise the points that you want. So lots of time for that. I will stop talking now for a moment, and I'd like to invite our first questioner, which is Sue Bonfanzi. Wait for the microphone.
I'd like to start by thanking all of you for attending this surprise. My name is a chance to question you, and I wanted to ask a question to help understand more about the village planning process and basically how it can help us. So I want to know how much money is being budgeted for implementing whatever it turns out is in the plan, and since a sum of money doesn't really necessarily tell us very much, what would that kind of amount that you've got in your heads typically buy for us?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you. Well, firstly, the village planning hasn't got individual budgets for individual areas. The process is, firstly, as your two has already explained, we've already got village plans drafted, but because people were quite frustrated that they didn't count when it came to planning applications, this next process is taking it forward for supplementary planning documents that will be embedded in the planning process. So the village plans themselves, and this refresh that we're doing in parallel, is, again, it's about identifying the priorities and using what are, in fact, the budgets, the council budgets, so that we are focusing them on the priorities for you in the local area, on the issues and the projects that are important for you here. Working collaboratively with the community, with the ideas that you have, seeing how we can take them forward together, how we can, some of the priorities we'll be meeting ourselves, some of them will be visions that will take time to achieve. I mean, there are already, we have the Community Road and Pavement Fund, which residents already can identify and go to a ballot for roads and in their areas, and 35,000 is budgeted for each village. But that's basically the process. So it is working with the residents, and it is, you know, really it's for you to identify the things that you think are important for your area.
Okay. Do you want to come back on any point?
Yes.
Sorry. You may know that some of us here in East Twickenham would be working on some ideas for streets, for example, streets improvements. And while we haven't hostage and it's not anything we could easily do as residents, I think I'd like to know, well, what's the point in us doing this unless you actually have some money to spend on things that come up with? Because it strikes me that we are coming up with things which are not necessarily what you would ordinarily do. You know, you might not be a great priority, you may not have any budget anywhere in the council for improving streets in East Twickenham because of the great scheme of things. You might not think it's very important, but we do. So I don't quite understand how what we might say and want in the village plan is actually going to come to fruition unless you've got spare money drifting around the council, which doesn't seem very likely.
Well, there isn't spare money drifting around the council. You're absolutely right about that. But as we go forward on with the consultations, I mean, this is when you we're discussing with officers, you are putting forward these ideas. Then, as we go, we have the stakeholder events. I mean, that's when we start to cost up projects and look at what is feasible. But first of all, we need to know what it is that you want to see. I mean, the vision for your area, what we can do now, what we can do in a year's time, what can be done in 5 years' time. If we don't start this process now, we're not going to have improvements. And that's the way we will gradually get the projects that you want to see and the improvements we want to see. I mean, we do, as you know, have a small village and town centre opportunities fund, for instance, and that goes towards. I mean, printed tomorrow, as you know, works very hard with that, and it's used towards, I think, flowers and hanging baskets, Christmas events and things like that, generally to increase. I'm straying now a bit into the business side, but they are all the things that they are for each village, and so they are small sums. And as we move forward, we'll look at what more we can do.
I don't want you to be discouraged. Sorry, the family, you're not discouraging. You can't eat in a restaurant unless there's a menu. Sometimes you can't go into the restaurant because you can't afford to. It's what usually happens to me with modern prices in London, but you can look in the window and see what might be offered. It's really sort of ideas shop, actually. And those ideas should be led by the local people. Now, not everything will be able to happen immediately, and I don't do promises that we can't keep, which is why Pamela's given a very cautious answer. But, for example, £3 million in the Parks Improvement Programme, so, there is money that can come. We just got a sixth form of St Orleans Park, that's a lot of money. Those things can be done. But it took over 30 years, I think, to resolve the question of the Diamond Jubilee Gardens in Twickenham, which I hope has been reasonably resolved. Not everything happened immediately, but if we can kind of agree on what the aspirations of the community are, then as things come along, we may be able to tick things off the menu and actually serve up some dishes. But they won't all happen immediately. In terms of street scene improvements, we're doing street scene improvements around the borough all the time. Certainly we ought to be able to help and provide support with the costing of things. So it's not a kind of, yeah, we're going to come along and give you all we want. That's not where we are. We're trying to tease out what would be nice to achieve looking forward for East Twickenham over the next, 4-10 years maybe. But hopefully we'll see some things coming along quickly. The other final thing I would say is that the planning defence is quite important, because if you've seen the other village plans that have been developed, they break down, Cuba I think is broken down to about 13 or 14 areas. So we try to give the planners a bit more power to defend against inappropriate development and keep the character of the community. So little things like that which cost nothing, I hope, will also help.
Councillor Street?
Yes, one of the things I wanted to say, bring some specificity here, is that the Mayor allocates money to achieve the strategy, the overall GLA strategy. And from that point of view, if I've got some idea of aspirations and things that people want, I'm in a position where I can start bidding for that. Obviously I can't do that unless I've got the ideas as to where I need to put that money. So it's important from my point of view. and sorry, and I was just going to say, and it sort of varies from the point of view whether it's long-term, short-term, and if we have that idea in our heads, then we're in a position where we can bid accordingly.
So, thank you very much indeed. Perfect timing as well, 8 minutes exactly. So, Philippa Edmonds, you're going to ask the next question.
Yes, Philippa Edmonds, local resident. I wanted to ask a question about Ride Place redevelopment. Given that more residential properties on the Ride House site would put extra pressure on scarce school spaces in East Twickenham, what provision could be inserted into the village plan? And actually you mentioned other statutory documents such as the LDF to ensure that any developer could not build something that adds to existing unmet demand for school places in East Twickenham.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Chapel.
Thank you very much. Well, obviously, anyone who lives in East Twickenham knows that this is a very live issue, and something that certainly I and the rest of the council have been very keen to get a school on that site. The reality is, anyone who was involved in the last application knows that when the site was sold, it wasn't sold to the council, it wasn't sold to the EFA, it was sold to Lidl. So Lidl now own the site, and many of you I know have been to the pre-planning consultation that Lidl have arranged, which showed a development which would be a large Lidl and residential. Now, I checked literally before this meeting, no planning application has been put in at all on that site, although obviously there are a lot of negotiations going on. And certainly the council will do everything that we can in planning terms to prevent that kind of development going on, because you're quite right. Not only would we not have a school on that site, but we'd have increased residential accommodation, which would put even more pressures on the school. The reality is that Lidl own the site, so we have to work very closely with Lidl and with the EFA, which is what council and officers have been doing over many, many months. And there's a lot of negotiations going on to get the best possible deal for residents. Now, I'm more aware than anyone of all the issues around that, and any application that goes on that site, whether it be from Lidl, whether it was from the EFA, if it was a council application, will have to consider all the points that came out in 2013 when we went through the process of stopping a travel lodge and a large unnamed supermarket that possibly could have been Sainsbury's. And those issues are very clear. There's the two conservation areas, the Richmond Road, East Twickenham Conservation Area and the Beresford Avenue Conservation Area. There's the issue of the Grade 2 listed building which sits immediately next to the site. There's the transport issues. There's the parking issues. There's the issues of those people who live in Ride Place and the impact on their residential amenity, as well as those of you that live in Beresford Avenue. And those are things that any application will have to take account of. And I can assure you that the planning officers will look very closely at all of those and make sure that anything that goes on that site is appropriate for that site. And I'm sure, I hope, I hate to speak for Benedict, who's sitting at the back, and for Helen, who's coming in a few minutes, but we will work very closely with residents to make sure that we listen very closely to everything that you have to say on that site and make sure that we get the best possible deal for residents and, more particularly, try and secure a school on that site so that children that live in East Twickenham have a local school that they can go to.
And Susan, if I could just say from my point of view, obviously this is a very live issue as you talked about, but it's an incredibly important issue for you and for the council. School places are one of our highest priorities, and we put in a lot of time planning for school places. And I would say this area in particular, officers and I probably spend as much time planning and looking at possibilities as we do in the rest of the borough. I've said before that I think Ride House is the best option we have. I want to see a school there. We have been in touch, going back to the previous owners, to try to acquire the site. They chose to sell it to Lidl. There are discussions going on. As Susan said, the site is owned by Lidl. They are keeping their options open, and until things are confirmed, we can't confirm on our side. But I think things have come a long way. They do understand the strength of feeling locally. They do understand the need in this area, and I'm hopeful and positive. But until we get to that point, we can't make any guarantees. But what we can keep doing is working through the Educational Funding Authority, which is doing the negotiations, to continue to press the case and make sure that the importance of that site and school places are known.
And I probably should also add that the council has identified that as an educational site, and it was interesting because it was one of many on a particular paper, and it got the most positive reaction of all of the sites. So clearly it's something that we know as a group that you want, and it's something that I want very much, is to have a school on that site.
Okay. Yes, indeed. And would you like to make a point as well? Yes.
Thank you very much for the response. And one point to make is I think a school would be very bonding for East Twickenham as well as the need.
Yes.
But obviously when we saw that little pre-application that came in, there were very few differences from the previous application, very dense and everything. And obviously one of the concerns is that if they try to go ahead, even if it was turned down locally, they may be thinking they can go to the planning inspectorate. So obviously we would hope that you're obviously mindful of all of that, because that's terribly important. Thank you.
We are absolutely mindful of that, and as anyone who was involved in the last application, that's why if they were to go ahead, if Lidl were to go ahead, and there's nothing to say that they would, or anybody else were to go ahead with a scheme of that size and bulk without any school provision, then we would work very closely, and it is, as you know, you were very heavily involved with this, I know, that we have to be very careful about not just getting something refused at planning committee because we can, but making sure that if it is refused, it's refused on grounds that would pass the test of an inspector. Because the last thing we want is for something to go through at inspector level without possibly some conditions and making sure that design and so on is exactly what we want for that area. So yes, I am incredibly mindful of that.
Thank you. The lady there, you wanted to make a point.
I'm not in favour of having a school there at all.
Can you hold the microphone to you?
I'm not in favour of having a school there at all.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. By the way, there's some seats at the front. For those of you standing at the back, there are.
Can you hear
seats.
now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm not in favour of having a school there at all. I could not think of a more dangerous place for a junior school. But with all the traffic coming and going on that main road, and I'm not the only one who thinks that way. So I don't know where you've got all this opinion on one side from.
So if I could say, I do understand the concerns that you have. The reality is that we have to find places for new schools, and we don't have the luxury of a lot of choices, and we choose to say, well, we'd like to put it at Ride House. It is the best of the options in the area. Our ears are open. We constantly are looking at sites. You know the area better than we do. If you've got ideas, better ideas of where they could go, we're absolutely there to have that discussion. But the reality is, and we're facing this in other areas, that new schools are having to go in sites that are not as optimal as where schools currently are. And it's the reality of the options that we have available to us.
I'd also make another point, it may come up later. I mean, the council doesn't call all the shots as far as school sites are concerned. The law, the council can't specifically propose schools. I mean, sites are acquired by the government through this education funding agency. We have been in touch with them and with Lidl, and yes, it has been our impression that people in East Twickenham, there are a lot of young families who would like to have a school in this area. Beggars can't be choosers as far as it comes to the site. With Lidl, I don't want to be disobliging about Lidl because they're entering into negotiations with the government, as they've said publicly, about a school. These are pretty hard-bitten characters that we're dealing with. This is a company which has expanded massively on the back of great public popularity. People go there. And numbers are things they look at rather a lot. At the moment, we're trying to persuade them to consider a school which would have a community benefit, even though it might not be the perfect site that we'd all have chosen. If they don't go for that, they will go. Let's not beat about the bush. They will go to try and cram as many houses and homes on that site as they can get away with. Either from this council or via the inspector. So there's never in life a council of perfection. You have to try and keep a balance, and what we're feeling is if we can persuade them that they should go for some element of schooling for young families in East Twickenham on that site, that would be a good thing. If there's a massive popular uprising against it, well, maybe we'd have to think again. Any new school site now is going to be difficult. The population of London is scheduled to rise to 11 million very soon. Nobody's particularly asked Londoners about that, but it's going to happen. So we do need school places, and we have a legal responsibility. The council has a legal responsibility to provide new school places, and that means schools of different types in different places where we can get them often.
And there are schools in difficult places now. Schools have travel plans. We're used to dealing with trying to make the traffic as calm as possible around schools. These are issues that we're having to face elsewhere, not just here.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on this point? If not, we'll move on and we have time to come back. I've got a couple of hands. Lady over there and then the gentleman right there.
I thought I came in a bit late. This is about the digital side, is it?
Yes.
Yes. I was just wondering what powers the council has to compulsory purchase that site, for example, to purchase it from others only at the moment. Because our children only got into Orleans because there was an extra grant added. We wouldn't get into any of that. It's quite appalling for families in this area, and it's quite outrageous not to have a school in East Twickenham. Given that, I am well aware that other local authorities compulsory purchase land for all sorts of reasons, I thought it would have been a really good reason to purchase that land and put a school on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just say briefly on that, then I think a couple of colleagues want to come. It's an important point, so it might take a couple more minutes on this. I think, I'm sure this will come up later. We're trying to coax that situation and get it by negotiation at school. Compulsory purchase is a real blunderbuss thing. It takes years. Even if you can achieve it, it takes years. These people have to eat checkbooks. They would combat it in the courts at every stage. We might lose the case, and it's not going to liberate the site. And even if we were able to get compulsory purchase rights at the end of the litigation, we would have to buy the site at residential house values, which would be way above what we would have to spend now potentially.
But it's an office site, isn't it?
Yes, but if they could show that they could get planning permission for housing on that site, they would be able to put that case. Sorry, I don't want to cut across you. I know what you're saying. Unfortunately, we also have law of the land now, which I actually led a revolt against in Parliament but didn't succeed, where there's automatic right for the conversion of offices into residential accommodation. An absolutely tomfool piece of legislation, but that is the law of the land at the moment. So anybody who owns an office, and we're losing enormous amount of office space across the borough to this, a developer can switch office space to residential accommodation without the need for planning permission. These are the conditions we're trying to operate in. So that's why we're looking for a negotiation on a very slow and possibly unsuccessful and very costly compulsory purchase system.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman there, and that's your hand at the back. Sorry, can I get this gentleman first, and then over there, the forwards with the glasses and the grey hair.
Hi, I'm actually going to ask a very similar question about later. But, the thing that people thinking about the schools here, and I think we've spoken to Susan and others, is that the lack of space is extraordinary, but also the fact of the matter is, I think the statistics are that actually most people would probably walk to the school, that the catchment area.
Well, we can come back on
that. But obviously there are statistics on this type of thing, and one can, yes, where do you live, ladies?
We live around here, but we from countrywide, that people always drive the children to school.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for that point. We'll get the point at the back, and then I'm going to invite Councillor Hodgins just to respond to that. Thank you. This is.
I'm not sure if this is the right forum for the question, but can you confirm that you're working on a plausible plan B if the little development goes ahead on that site?
Okay, thank you. So,
a plausible plan B rather than...
Yes, the quick answer to that is yes, we are continuing to look at other options and other sites, yes.
Great stuff. Okay, thank you. Okay, 2 more hands. We'll take those two briefly on this point. if there's time to, we can come back to this later, but there's a gentleman there, yes, please.
Yeah. It's very disappointing that the Richmond Bridge site can go ahead in September 15 as planned. A lot of parents here were really banking on that to find somewhere for their children to go to school. In 2 months' time, there'll be the Office Day, and I think a lot of children are unable to find places close by. They won't get into Orleans, they won't get into the vineyard, they won't get into St Mary's or St Stephen's. They'll be looking at places in Petersham or Sheena at best, or potentially in some cases not having offers bringing their close to the environment at all. School is urgently needed in September 15. It's moved again September 16. As a concerned parent, I'd like to hear what other contingencies are there if the middle site, the proposal for the White House site is stalled, or if negotiations with Lidl fail to proceed at a pace to allow it even to open next year. The choices that we face as parents are really very stark.
Okay, Councillor Chapel.
I mean, Paul can probably answer across the borough, but I'm fully aware of this is exactly why I went to school. I mean, I've worked with parents this year who didn't get places in offer day, and this is exactly why we need, I'm very sorry, but I absolutely believe this is why we need a school in East Twickenham, to enable children and parents in East Twickenham to walk, and I stress walk, to their local school. It's what we did when I was a little girl, it's what you automatically did, you went to your local school, you didn't think about it, you went to your local school. And everybody in the road went to school, and that's what I would like ideally for East Twickenham. And everybody who lives in Cresswell Road, Morley Road, Cambridge Road, instead of looking at an empty site and having to go, as you say, to the Russell or Darrell or wherever else if they're not lucky enough, is able to walk across the road and go to a local school, and that's what we're working for.
Because of course at the moment they have to drive.
Exactly, you have to drive, and you say drive, but many people don't have cars. They may have to get on a bus, they may have younger siblings, so all of these things have to be considered. So for me, I'm absolutely clear, the ideal space for a school, given the difficulties we have, is right.
And I'm confident there, the demand in the area, I mean the catchment area at my local school, which I think is the least in the borough, but is less than 300 metres. But typically you're getting catchment areas of 500 metres. You may get the small number of people who drive, but people do walk to their local schools, and they live close by, and the demand is such here that I have no doubt that will be the case here.
And we can, in planning terms, it can be made very clear, a travel plan is enforceable, and it can be made very, very clear to the school that it's just not acceptable. I mean, I work in a school in Putney where there is no parking, and it doesn't take much. A couple of traffic warnings is enough to scare our parents off. They don't know today.
Thank you. Was your point a different point to the one
small
preferred?
point. I'm just going to ask how many children the school would accommodate.
How many children the school would accommodate was that question?
It's proposed to be 2 forums. So 420.
Eventually.
So 60 a year.
Where will they play?
So there will be then a design of the area, and there are different options. But you know, these are some of the challenges we're facing with the new school sites. That the play area immediately on site is not as large as you would have at other schools. You'd have a combination of an immediate play area there, but then they would look in the broader area for playing sports fields.
I mean, I'm going to go on to prolong this because we'll come back to it, but this is absolutely why we have to have a sort of community dialogue, that people have different views in this room, and also that you can't really have the council of perfection. Of course, it'd be wonderful to be able to have a place where you could lay out a nice big school with grounds and so on and so forth. But the reality is, I mean, you know this area, this has been for a long time, 2 or 3 areas of the borough which are under school. One of them's actually is the area that I represent in East Sheen. Just lately we've had a small school open, a free school actually, with a catchment area, immediate catchment area of just 480 metres I think. Doesn't have a playground, very popular, very successful, and they manage. It may not be the perfect future, but that in a tightly populated area and particularly in a situation where councils do not have the legal power to propose new schools, and where people wish to keep green space, quite understandably. These are the kind of things you have to weigh. So I know that there are other ideas for the area, but if you yourselves, in this planning process, when we have a village plan, if the community said, yes, we would like to give up this area potentially for a school, well then that could be something that comes out of the community, but at the moment we're trying to work on this side.
Okay.
And if
I'm going to, sorry.
Were you going to move on?
I was going to move us on.
Well, there was just one point here which I think is important to address, is this year. I can say that, you know, I absolutely share your disappointment, and I was disappointed as well that we couldn't, well, that EFA and Little couldn't get negotiations done in time. We've expanded all of the schools in the area as much as possible. I've said we need a new school in the area, and that is ultimately the solution. We are putting more capacity in the surrounding areas. I don't have a solution that just is the perfect alternative for a new school. It does need to be a new school, and we do need to keep pressing for 2016. But we're expanding the vineyard. Deer Park is going in Richmond. There's also another new school happening on the other side of Twickenham. So there is more capacity in the wider area. I know that's not the ideal solution or the long-term solution. The longer-term solution is we need to keep pressing and get a new school in the area.
Positively last thing, I mean, I am in direct contact with the schools minister, John Nash, Lord Nash, on this, and he isn't precisely aware of East Twickenham and precisely aware of the importance of this area. So there will be a push from the top to try to get some resource from the government.
Thank you. I'm conscious there's a few other hands. I'm going to give you the opportunity to come back to this later, but I do want to make sure we give everybody a chance who's posed a question to ask it. So we will come back to it if you wish to later. The next question, though, was from Anushka Kirkjian. So, Anushka, where are you? Over there, please. We'll get a microphone to you.
Thank you. I'd generally like to express my concerns at the steady deterioration in the state of Richmond Road. Since we moved in 2011, it's become almost the exclusive reserve of charity shops, fast food chains, and every time a new shop opens, it competes with the others in terms of how horrid it can be, in my opinion anyway. There's no community spirit, there's no fishmonger, butcher, baker. In fact, the baker that was there a few weeks ago that closed down said to me, we don't get anyone, it's just people who go into the fast food chains and drop litter. And so I'm really saddened by it, and what do you propose to buck that trend?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Well, yeah, I'm really sorry to see this, and particularly as you do have a very active traders association. I mean, Hinton Tamala does a lot. I mean, both to try to encourage footfall, to do the very best to make East Twickenham look attractive with the flowers and hanging baskets and things. We are, of course, as a council, aren't responsible for the landlords who let the shops. We can't dictate that. What we can do is work with the businesses, with the traders association. And we can work very hard. We can, to a certain extent, some of our planning policies do protect some of the key frontages and the types of shops that can open in that case, although that is sort of being eroded by some government laws as well. But like you, I mean, you do have an excellent shoe repairer. But it is sad because, of course, it is in a way, it's a gateway, in fact, to the borough, because it's going over to going towards Richmond Bridge. It's a very important area, and we do. I mean, as I say, we work with the Traders Association. I'd like to see what we can do to try to increase footfall. There is a question if one knew some of the landlords, if they were local landlords, and one can engage them and then find out from the community the sort of shops the community want to have there. That's in fact what they've done very successfully in St Margaret's. And by doing that, you're then getting the community use of the shops. But so many of these shops are owned by investment companies, they're part of portfolios. So we don't even have that direct dialogue, although we do meet with commercial agents. So, you know, I'm very happy to talk to you afterwards. But I share your concern and would like to do everything we can. As we do have a town centre opportunities fund, as I said, we have civic crime grants. But it is, we're not in control of who actually occupies those shops.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I was sad to see the boulangerie it was probably you were referring to. Yeah, it's sad to see it go. It's not much to add to. I would like to hear what other people feel about it, because it's a problem right across the borough. We're trying desperately hard to support high streets, as Pamela's saying, but at the end of the day, it's the taste of the public. If they want to pass those doors and go to a fast food place, you can't order. We don't have planning powers to say we don't want that type of shop here. It's not the kind of planning legislation that we have in this country. You can't designate a site and say we need a fishmonger here, even if a fishmonger might think it was a commercial place to take. It's not within the powers of local authorities.
Okay, follow up point in the front. If you want to come back on it, of course, you're very welcome to as well.
I was just wondering, there do seem to be a few shops that are sort of boarded up or seem to have changed use without sort of rather stealthily. And I was wondering what attempts have been made to, by the planning department, to see whether to take enforcement action or whatever, to see whether these changes of use have actually been sanctioned by the planning commission has been granted the change of use. I can think of quite a few shops that just seem to be now residential. It's not clear what is behind the front door of what used to be a shop. And certainly one shop seems to be made into offices. I can see people sitting there behind sort of clear by smoked glass, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I mean, it's taken away a shop from that area.
Okay.
Yeah, well, first of all, one would have to actually look, and certainly we can ask planning people to have a look at it. If you're talking about along Richmond Road, it would be very helpful to identify. There are some shop fronts which are entitled to have changes. We have to look to actually see what the designation of those shops actually are. And if this is the case, then enforcement action can indeed be taken. Yeah. I mean, that's right. I mean, I would just sort of add to what I said before, because it was, we basically speak about the loss of office space. And this does have repercussions as far as shops are concerned, because of course employees are using those local shops in the same way as they were before. And this is happening, I know, in Richmond itself. I mean, but we can certainly look at that from an enforcement point of view. Yeah.
I mean, if you could send somebody, if you could liaise, I suppose, with the community, say, okay, we're going to, if you could somehow liaise with the community and say, somebody will go, some people are planning to come and we'll walk down Richmond Road, and so I or whoever is interested could point out X, Y, and Z. That would be helpful.
Sorry, yes, I'm very happy to do that. And I would say that we do work very closely with Belinda Tamana and the Trade Association. So, I mean, he may well be able to identify where this has happened, or actually have some background information. We meet every other month, because we have a business and retail alliance. And we have very recently done a little survey amongst all our village centres, just to find out, what the traders themselves would like to see. And in fact, I mean, in East Twickenham, one of the things that they found the 30 minutes free parking quite helpful for people popping in and using the shops, but they do actually also say, I think in some areas, parking is allowed until 10 o'clock, and they said that some of the businesses themselves find that quite frustrating, because they can't park when they want to go into open up their business. So there are various issues, but I just want you to be aware that we do have this very close dialogue with the trades and with the Trades Association and indeed the local community, because I think it's all very much part of the East Twickenham Association as well. Yes.
Through you, Chairman, Tamara, won't there be a walkabout as part of the...
There will.
Yeah,
yes,
so part of this
on.
process will be, as soon as we get the plan, precisely having a walkabout with local residents, so precisely you can say on the spot, this is what's worrying us and that, etc. So that will be happening, and we'll be able to get you today.
Okay. Thank you. I was going to move us on. Is your point different to what we've heard before related to this issue? Okay, go on. Final say.
I was just going to say that part of the problem surely is caused because we don't know what's going to happen at the right outside. If that becomes a supermarket, then all those other shops will change what they're going to do anyway, won't they?
Yeah.
So there's no point in having a butcher or a baker if they're all going to end up in Lidl finding it. So until that's sorted, it's going to continue to be the way it is.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Helen Baker to... Helen is here. Make yourself known. Helen, there you are. Front middle. Thank you.
Before I ask my question, on this occasion with all the key representatives of East Twickenham here, I'm sure most of us are very sad and shocked to hear the news about the death of Booby, our pharmacist. And I think this is a good... You didn't know, he died suddenly on Monday. Greatly loved in the community, and I'm sure we would all like to express our sorrow and express our condolences to his family.
Very well. Thank you.
Anyway, my question, which I'm asking as chair of the Friends of Garden, the chair of the Friends of Cambridge Gardens, a group which helps to look after the well-being of Warren Gardens as well, which is the little park next door to it. So my question, Cambridge and Warren Gardens on the riverside are East Twickenham's only open green space. Given the high importance given by LBRUT residents to parks and open spaces, and given the recently reported importance of these spaces for people's well-being, how will Richmond ensure their proper maintenance in future years? Will Richmond support and implement the maintenance and biodiversity plans for these spaces proposed by the Friends of Cambridge Gardens? And will Richmond take action to improve the deplorable state of Warren Gardens, which is likely to be used for an international event in 2016 or 2017? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Multi-part question. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you very much. And yes, you're right, we do pride ourselves on our parks and open spaces, and we know, I think it was the top issue from our all-in-one survey, just how much all of our residents value them. And indeed, we have had a £3 million parks investment programme. And so a lot of parks have been improved, but what you're rightly saying is it's all very well improving parks, but maintaining them to that stand is extremely important. And certainly as far as I'm concerned, whilst I'm the cabinet member from Borough, and I will work with our parks people who are very dedicated staff. I'm sure you do know Dave Allister and Jeff Don and the team. Yeah.
Time for them.
Yeah.
They are constrained in what they can do, and they need your support.
Well, I think, I'm very happy to have a meeting with them to discuss this as well. But I'm sorry to hear you say they feel constrained, because I haven't actually, that hasn't been fed back to me. But I will certainly discuss with them, because we do, of course, I recognise the importance of Cambridge Gardens. I haven't actually seen your biodiversity plan, so I can't say that's exactly what we'll do, but I can certainly discuss it with David and Yvonne. I'm very sorry to hear what you say about the deplorable state of Warren Gardens. That worries me, that you feel that it does need. Well, in that case, all I can sort of promise is that I will talk to officers about it. And I do know that you have got an event next. Is it next?
At the moment, the date is uncertain.
Oh, uncertain.
2016 or 17.
All right,
more
right.
likely 17.
Yes, but I mean, yes. But in any event, you know, we want to make sure that it's space that's in good order. So yeah, I will take that back, and thank you. I would like to thank you for all you do as well, and for highlighting this at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Yes, I strongly underline the thanks there. And again, as I said right at the start, we're not here to say, no, you're not right, everything's wonderful. Everything isn't wonderful everywhere, but what is actually wonderful with a small W, as it were, are the parks and green spaces that we have, and often the smallest ones, the most important. We have invested, I don't like policy to say we have invested, it means we've taken quite a lot of your money and we've applied it to something. But the Parks Improvement Plan, so-called, has got £3 million over 5 years. I have to say that some other council leaders I speak to are absolutely amazed that Richmond Council finds as much as that for parks and green spaces. We try to do that because we know that that's valued. You know, I've lived here for most of, well, decades, and I know that that's what makes our borough what it is. So yes, we'll have to do better, and we'll come along during the walkabouts, and we'll see, and we'll have a look at what needs to be done in Warren Gardens, and then we'll see in the 5-year programme, you know, what might or might not be accommodated. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, you know, everything you want will be done, but we'll certainly have a look at it, and please be assured that the parks and green space are absolutely fundamental importance as far as we're concerned.
May I have my follow-up question?
Yes, indeed.
Which will be in 2 parts. Firstly, if you have the £3 million parks improvement programme, and I think it's this that you were referring to, can you please try and spend some of it on Warren Gardens in the next 2 years, bearing in mind that you may have the Belgian ambassador and other VIPs from London and possibly from Belgium in that space in 2 years' time. Secondly, as I've said to people in the Parks Department, with regard to the maintenance plan and the biodiversity plan, we understand that money is tight. We understand that we can't necessarily get everything paid for that we want. But is it possible to approve those plans in principle and then talk to us about how it's implemented? I mean, although I don't want to commit myself either, there is some scope for volunteering, there is some scope for independent fundraising, but if the plans are never accepted in principle, then we can't do anything. So can you work with us in this way?
Yeah, I know. So yes, I mean, I will definitely go back and talk to Parks about that. I mean, I take your point because there's often ways of raising external funding as well. Once you've got, I mean, I happen to be a Petersham conservative Petersham Common, and you know, we can also look sometimes at external funding. So it's important if you've got a plan, then you've got something to go out there with. So yes, of course, I think one needs to use this as a way forward, and we'll have those discussions. Thank you.
This is being recorded, and I think the answer is yes, but without promises. Yes.
Comment from the gentleman there.
Hello, I'm Greg Carlo. I'm on the board running the Richmond Bridge flats, and I think I should bring to your attention that there are several ladies in that estate, and 1 or 2 outside, who've expressed to me concern about the oppressive nature of the Warren Gardens. There's a place, there's 3 layers of tree, and some ladies have said they're scared to walk past it. And that really, I think, is partly due to the very dark nature of it, and partly due to what I would say is a pretty disgusting state of maintenance.
Thank you, and I'm guessing Helen would concur with that, so hopefully we can
absolutely, and in fact, Greg, I'm glad to say, is one of our members.
Great.
And yes, we are aware of the concerns that come from Richmond Estate, and express them, in fact, to Richmond Parks.
Very much noted, and we'll
report back on it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move us on to the next question, remembering we have time at the end for more general questions and to come back on new points that might not have been raised about the current question. So, Sam Walters. Sam.
My question goes back really to schools. Given the religious turmoil that seems to threaten the world, to say nothing of the recent events and murders in Paris and elsewhere, the fact that students are not selected for state secondary schools on any other grounds, how does the Richmond Council justify its support for religiously segregated education, and indeed for the promotion of a new Catholic secondary school with the power to select its pupils in a school paid for by all of us?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
So, I don't think I can tie this issue to what happened in Paris and who's going this way, but let me say, I do understand that there are differing views on this. I assume you were aware and involved. We had a very lengthy debate about this in our last term and a consultation. And you've got your view. There are also people that we represent who very strongly favour having the option of faith schools. Faith schools are a part of our system. We've got faith schools as primary. Before St. Richard Reynolds came along, we did have one faith secondary school. I would say if it was the only thing that we did, then I think it'd be a very fair question to say, well, why is that the only thing that you're focusing on? But it was part of an overall plan to increase capacity and quality and choice right throughout our system. So there were people who very strongly supported the introduction of the new school. It's got 150 places per year. This year there were over 800 people who put it down as one of their preferences. Over 160 put it down as their first preference. It is very popular. There was very strong support within the consultation. It was a long-standing commitment by both of the main local political parties. But at the same time, we also, in the way that Nick put it, we also proposed and invested your money in sixth forms across the borough. We're working with Richmond College on introducing a new school and a rebuild of Richmond College. We're working with Turing House, which is a new proposed secondary school as well. So we are adding capacity and choice across all of the system. We're also working with our schools and challenging our schools to make sure that they are all giving a very high quality education. So I know that there are differing views. There are also those on the other side that strongly support it. It is part of our school system, and we do believe in that as part of the choice. In saying that there are differing views, there is one thing that I always have not agreed with, which is, I think, the implication at the end that somehow the rest of us are subsidizing a group. The people who go to that school, the families who go to that school, pay their fair share of taxes just like the rest of us. So they are not getting subsidized in a way that others are not. I understand that there may be a difference of view around whether you have faith in school and the admissions, but it's one thing that I'm not agreed with, that somehow they are being subsidized. But as I say, we've got an overall program of expanding choice, which includes the choice of sixth forms within our schools, capacity, making sure that we're continuing to drive up standards for everyone.
Thank you. Other points on that, or would you like to follow up? Hand at the back there, just behind you, on the other side.
Does this work? Just one supplementary on that. Obviously that was a decision taken a number of years ago, but there is a new decision which is related to the fact that that school has proposed to convert itself from a voluntary school to an academy. It's doing so because if it had proposed to be an academy originally, it would have had to have had 50% of its places available for the community as opposed to none, which is the current position. Would the council support the call that Vince Cable has made and others to for the school to, if it converts to an academy, also to change its admissions policy to make 50% of places available to anybody, whether they're Catholic or not religious or whatever.
Well, perhaps I would answer that, and obviously I know you took a very strong position in the campaign that took place, and while you don't refer back to it, I think it's reasonable to do so, because the premise of the question was actually slightly wider than this, and Sam, by the way, I'd like to say about Sam that I had the honour of proposing, no, don't mind my saying this, Sam Walterspear, Freeman of the Borough, for his incredible lifetime achievement of the Orange Tree Theatre, and I think we should all thank and congratulate Sam on that. Religious turmoil, yes, we see what goes on in the world. I don't actually think if you look for the epicentre of evil in the world, you would find it in Pope Francis, actually. And when I walked out of Parliament today to come here, it's an amazing display, because the anniversary of Magna Carta, 800 years, and there's a display of all the landmarks of legislation about liberalism and about freedom, about how our country advanced. And one of the banners that's up there is about the 1829 Catholic Emancipation Act. And for 300 years in this country, a Catholic minority was oppressed, denied rights under the law, and it was only in 1829 that they were admitted into some degree of partial, full identity and fellow citizenship. I think we should actually be rather ashamed of that record, funnily enough. And so I do think that religious education has a place, because we have religious people in our country. Most of the schools and hospitals that originally founded in this country were from a religious impetus. This school has been very popular. It must decide what it wants to do. The council does not want to impose. I don't support a call by Vince Cable or anybody else to say the council, the school should change in this way or that. This is an oversubscribed school. I would let it be as part of a wider family of schools. I hope we're going to have this new secondary school in Twickenham in 2017, as we promised. The other thing I would say about this is that we did promise this school, as the Liberal Democrats also promised they would support a Catholic school, because our Catholic population was the only borough, only one other borough in London which did not have a Catholic secondary school, although there are vibrant Catholic primary schools and Church of England primary schools. We made the promise that we would deliver that. When the opportunity came, and we've been able to achieve a secondary school there actually for half the price of what we'd be able to achieve the Twickenham, the next one in Twickenham for. Many people challenged it, and I respect their motives, I respect your view, Sam, and yours, Jeremy, but the majority of people who responded supported it. But I don't believe that if you give an undertaking that you should withdraw the promise when the going gets tough. So I thought that we should go through, we should honour the pledge that we gave, we should make that school possible. We did facilitate it. It doesn't absorb our resources. The revenue runs down from the government, down from the church to run the revenue funding. I believe in an inclusive society. Those people, that once oppressed minority, we should allow to have their education. I personally don't feel threatened by it. And I say I don't think that people who preach that you should love your neighbour as yourself, you should love your enemy, and you shouldn't kill, are necessarily the people that I would be most after pursuing.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the final of the set of questions and then throw the floor open after that. So the final question is from Ian Fitzgerald. Ian, is at the front, right at the front up here. Not right at the front, so stop there, go back one. Perfect.
A lot of my question actually is slightly covered already. I was going to ask about the council's views of having a little and perhaps a large Lidl and a small school on the site. I think that's been quite well kicked around. I suppose one of the things that is noticeable, though, that's come up is basically the traffic situation, whichever way one looks at it on Richmond Road. And obviously one's also, we've had quite a lot of evidence appearing about Lidl in Chessington. I'm sure you've seen some of the papers about the fact that they get very, very large lorries, which are refrigerated lorries, which come in at strange times and make lots of noise. They're going to have to turn across the road. I mean, ultimately, I think this is really about the council's view and people's views about a large Lidl. There is no doubt, talking to local residents, that people want the local shops to improve, and indeed quite a lot of people feel that a upmarket Lidl, which is what they're trying to do, by the way, they are trying to improve their perceptions, and perhaps a basket store, a market stall or a type Lidl with improved product might increase the footfall. But I guess the biggest issue's got to be the impact of people that go to a large Lidl with a car park drive. And the impact on the roads in this area has got to be scary.
Okay.
It really has, because this is people are going to drive to this. People that drive, the parking spaces in Lidl will cater for this. There's quite a lot of evidence, as we can circulate the evidence from Chessington residents and other residents associations that have had big issues with Lidl trucks, deliveries. There's not one delivery a day, there's going to be 3 or 4, etc. So it's really the environmental issues on parking as well, residents parking. There aren't enough residents parking places for existing residents in Morley, Cresswell, Cambridge and others.
Okay, thank you. So traffic implications of a large Lidl. Councillor Speak.
I share all of your concerns. And what we have to do is work with Lidl and try and address them. And that really is dependent on what they produce in the way of a planning application. Obviously, if it was to be flat, it would be a very different transport characteristics from Lidl. So we have to, I'm afraid, wait until they produce something on paper that we can evaluate. Included in that, as part of any application, would be a delivery plan. We would expect them to provide us with a delivery plan, and we would obviously be looking to protect the residents and ensure that the noise of those wire cages and whatever else is at an appropriate time. So we are very conscious of the problem there, and we will be doing what we can to address it. It's not just Lidl, I have to say. I have to deal with Tesco trucks knocking down traffic islands and trying to manoeuvre their way around queue. It's a problem in many locations. One of the issues that we have to face is that the bigger trucks mean less frequency in terms of deliveries. So there is a trade-off, and that is one of the things that we have to evaluate when the time is right. But I do share your concern. Richmond Road is vital to the connection of the borough. I mean, we have 2 places where we can cross, and one of them is there. So, when I say cross, I mean obviously across the river. We will be looking at that very closely.
Okay. Follow-up question at the front. Is there? It's twice now. It's come up the point about the timing for the little sort of planning permission when it happens. Is there any indication of when they're likely to put in an application? Do you know?
I'm not aware.
I think it's dependent on the negotiations and everyone coming to agreement on what is going to happen.
And also, obviously, when we do get it today, we want the planning application to be as final as possible, because people who were involved in the last one will know that we've had to suffer a lot of changes, and so often we weren't even sure what we were trying to object to or agree to if we wanted to agree to it. So it's absolutely vital at these early stages that we try and look at all of the issues that you've raised. And there will, anyone who was involved in the last one, the reasons for refusal stand. They haven't been challenged at appeal. And there are 3 main, I've got them in front of me here very sadly, but there's 3 main reasons. There was design, there was street scene, and then there was things to do with parking and transport around a legal agreement. I'm very happy for anyone to see these. They're up on the website if you want to see them. And one of the things there it referred to was looking at the traffic management, and particularly taking into account the fact that it's quite a unique situation in that on one side of the Richmond Road we have a CPZ, albeit a very limited one, 10:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday. But on the other side, Beresford Avenue Park roadside, we don't have CPZ, which obviously is something that will have to be borne in mind, because I take your point exactly, that if you have people coming to a Lidl and there aren't enough parking spaces on the Lidl, where are they going to go? They're not going to turn around and go back. They are going to try and find on-street parking. And during the day, that's only going to be on the Beresford Avenue side, but at the weekends, that could be anywhere. And it's already a struggle to park around here, as we all know. So it really will be taken into account. We're fully aware of it, as I hope our Lidl and certainly our planning officers are.
Okay, lady there, have you got the microphone at the moment? Yes.
Just on follow up to that is air quality issues, I suppose, and the impact of increased traffic on Richmond Road. I was wondering what information the council had on air quality on Richmond Road and whether we're already exceeding various, for example, NOx limit. So I'd like to know what information there is. If there's no information, what steps you take to get that information and feed that into any planning application for Lidl.
Pamela Fleming, did you want to say?
Well, no, only that I have to honestly say, that information may be available. I don't know it. I have to go back and get it. I certainly ask.
I mean, we do have obviously air quality monitoring equipment, so I mean, it's an interesting suggestion. We should come along and get a baseline. Yeah.
Okay, I've got two comments from the audience. So Philip at the front, and then the lady who asked the question earlier, Mishka, I think it is. So.
Yes, my point of the question was about the safety concerns of deliveries and also the air pollution issues. The HGVs that deliver to a lot of supermarkets are 5 times more likely to be involved in fatal accidents than cars on local roads. So we've got two big worries, the safety but also the pollution. And if we're going to have a Lidl, they could bring products in smaller, less polluting vehicles, low emissions vehicles, and very often they say they want to use the big vehicles because it suits them. They do multiple drops at different supermarkets, so it's cheaper for them. And seeing it's such a delicate area, safety-wise and pollution area, that these are the type of restrictions that could be enforced upon them to use low emissions vehicles, small vehicles, for example. That's the type of thing, because it is a sensitive area and also very strict timings on development.
Yeah, oh sorry, absolutely. This is something that came up in the last application, and certainly I'm very aware that the wall immediately behind the site backs onto, I know your back garden and many other people's back gardens, and it's something that we highlighted last time, that in order to accommodate the site and the road, officers were talking about very early in the morning deliveries. Well, that's great in terms of the road network, but it's not so great if you're woken up every morning to the sound of a vehicle reversing and all the other noises that go with it. So again, that's something that has to be borne in mind, and that's what I said about, somebody asked me earlier, was I aware of the inspector? I'm very aware of the inspector, and that's the type of thing, as you say, if it was to go ahead, that we could condition, and what we'd never want to do is to lose that kind of condition because an inspector doesn't feel it's important, because they won't understand the area as well as our planning officers and we do. So all of these things are a balance. The whole of this site is a balance, and it's one that we're going to work as hard as we possibly can to get in the residents' favour, and that's all we can say, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Anushka, did you have a different point to raise? Okay, related to this though. Okay, and then Ian, I'm going to invite you if you want to come back.
I was going to try not to pick on certain shops on Richmond Road, but I will anyway. There's a carpet shop that's the frontage of the shop. They've cut bits of the carpet to say carpet shop. And there's no sense of pride, there's no kind of sense of how to improve the shop, the frontage of these shops. So Richmond Road can't, in my opinion anyway, can't get any worse than it is. So it was a kind of general aspiration to bring it up, regardless of whether there is a Lidl or not. What's the kind of general vision, as the council keeps saying? What vision is there to move ahead?
Okay, we did pick this up earlier in conversations about the shop. We haven't specifically talked about street scene on the road. Is that something you want to?
Well, I think this is something that we certainly should be discussing during the village planning process, both in the supplementary planning document, because it is, after all, businesses are involved as well in the supplementary planning. So it is, we would be looking at the shop fronts and the shops generally. So I think this is an issue. And then also for the village plan and the aspiration and the vision you want to see. And even if it's not, as we've said before, these things aren't instantly achievable. I mean, we have, because it was identified as an area that needed a lot of work, we've done a vast amount of improvements in Witten High Street. And that is actually showing, and the shopkeepers themselves, because it's been improved, you know, one's seeing better looking shops, better streets, seeing everything from what the council has done. So, I mean, I think this is all to be fed through into the village planning process. So I would say, please get involved in it. And we can also pick it up during supplementary planning documents and the features as well.
I mean, the residents, I mean, you have a power to go or not to go to places, and it's a limited power. I had a long fight in my ward against Tesco. I guess I mustn't be rude about Tesco when I'm being recorded, but it was the second Tesco they wanted to open in East. I don't understand why anyone would want to have 2 Tesco's in 400 metres, but it's part of the fall of Tesco. They were becoming a real estate business, really, rather than a company that was interested in quality. And everybody said we had demonstrations outside and placards and people picketed, and they said, "Oh, kill off the little shop next door that we all love so much." And it breaks my heart when I come home on the train every evening. There they are, they come off the train, they all pile into Tesco, and they all walk past the door of the little shop, which is, I think, going to close quite soon potentially, which they all swore to protect. So there is a bit of a power in our hands to support the good shops. I think, going back to what we said earlier, it's a four-sided thing. I wish that we should have the landlords in this room, but we could never find who they are. We've got the community, we've got the council, and we should be able to identify the businesses who want to come in, and that's the kind of thing Pamela's business work is trying to do, to identify and encourage people. We will try, but at the end of the day, obviously you, the public, has anyone told that carpet shop how awful it looks? I'm not saying we should be brave enough to do that, but these are small things. But I would make this suggesting you should do that. But why not? Somebody.
Okay, I've got 2 hands to come in on this point. I've got Sue at the front. Since you're next to the lady there with the microphone.
At the risk of being lynched, I would like to say that I would love a little, and it might sell bread, and it might sell fish, and it might sell a little meat. It doesn't have to be huge. I don't want to spoil our beautiful East Twickenham, which I love in spite of the carpet shop. And about the school, I'd just like to say, you can hear, and those of you who can see me, note that I'm old. I walked my children from Richmond Bridge to Orleans Infant School and then to the Vineyard. It didn't do me or them any harm to walk. And I think I would not have sent my children to the Ride House site had there been a school there because of the pollution. I don't want my grandchildren to go to school and play among the traffic.
Thank you very much. So I've got a comment coming from the front, Sue, but I did say I'd give Ian a right to reply. So just wait for the microphone, Ian, thank you.
Absolutely and utterly agree with the last statement. But the fact of the matter is that these people in East Twickenham will have to walk to Kingston and Ham, and that's an awful lot further than Orleans and the Vineyard, because there are no places for the children in this area. And I think people have to understand that. Down my road alone, I'm shocked that there are 5 or 6 families who have no prospects, who are having no places in schools for their children. And this is something that even people that might object to schools should feel some sympathy. Totally agreed about walking, no problem with walking. My grandmother used to walk from Strawberry Hill to go to church at St Stephen's. But the fact of the matter is, there are no school places for young local residents.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say on that one, it is our duty to make sure that within the borough we do provide enough places. And in the end, we do provide enough places, but it is absolutely getting those places to where people are, so that they can walk. And we need a new school in this area. And we've said it a number of times. It is about the best option that we need to go for.
Okay. Sue, is your comment on the traffic and shops? Okay, streets in coffee shops. Sue.
I wanted to make a couple of specific points. Really to ask whether council support this sort of thing, whether it's the kind of thing a village plan can help us with, whether in fact these things might actually get into supplementary planning guidance. These are points that a fellow resident who's not able to be here is very keen on. There are specific features, which I know is something that was looked at in the Kew Village Plan, the supplementary planning guidance, of the shops along Richmond Road, which get painted over, chipped away at, festooned with electrical cables and stuff, like these pilasters between the shops and capitals on the top of them. Can the village plan and the guidance go down to that level of detail? Because at the moment, no one pays attention to them. The other thing that's quite important in our street scene is the width of the pavement, because most of the pavement is really narrow, and that's now festooned with hoops you can tie bicycle to. And a parking payment machine appears to be in the middle of the street, and people passing their buggies and the litter bins and all the rest of it. But we have got 1 or 2 bits of wider pavement, which are actually quite useful both in amenity but also just visually. Can the village plan and the village plan guides go down to the level of saying this is what we want, if people support it generally?
Yes, yes.
Very clear. Very clear. Yes.
Yeah, is the answer. Certainly on the shops and the details, and on the sort of street scene itself, and the wider pavement, I would say that's more of a village planning issue itself than the supplementary planning document. But yes. It can, and these are the things to be identified when you do the walkabouts. It's going to be very important because there'll be the officers and the project managers there, and so they can be identified then, as well as in the consultations. But to be actually doing it on the spot is going to be easy.
And where we have projects, we can offer small grants for improvement. We can't cover the whole cost, obviously, but we can encourage and do and have in various places encouraged improvements in the appearance of key frontages.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are now, Jeremy, I think, has a comment on this, and then we're open to wider questions. So we've got about 35 minutes together left, so any other questions after this? Jeremy.
There's just another point on the streets, just to get it on your list. By the way, I think the village plan idea is a good one. I welcome that. Estate agents boards in Richmond Road. There is never a time when there are no estate agents boards sticking out, on what is a run of shops, which is a conservation area. Are you empowered to do anything about it, and can we put it in the plan?
Okay, empowered.
It's quite tricky. They are limited. They should be only a limited time. That they're up. But then I know this happens. It is a question of enforcement. But it should be there. But we can look at it.
But we have had enforcements on Richmond Road because residents have contacted us, and we have actually managed to get enforcement. So yes is the answer. We can, but it is difficult.
Okay, so we can pick up on the walkabouts again then?
I think I have heard, and I don't know, there have been other councils that have tried little campaigns on it, but it's something we should reflect on, see what we can do. It's a good point. It's everywhere.
Oh God, where
I'm always amazed how many estate agents there are. I seem to be sort of threatening almost every business that I'm supposed to be pro-business, but so I better not go too far down this road. But there's huge rows in barns, and almost every new place that opens up seems to be an estate agent. Whereas logically, in 10 years' time with the internet, there shouldn't be that much need for an estate agent. But represents another sort of real estate, isn't it?
Okay, other questions? We can go back on some of the things provided there, new areas. Got one hand up. If you can put your hand up if you have a question, and then I get an idea of how many people definitely want to speak. I'm seeing 3, so 4 so far. Okay, great stuff. But of course we'll continue the debate as we go to 5 questions so far. Gentleman was first with his hand up is in the back in the middle there.
I would like to ask about the plans for improving the traffic flow in Richmond Road as a separate topic, not as an add-on to whether there's a lid or not.
Okay.
Irrespective of whether that building is filled or never filled, it is, in my opinion, the most congested road in the whole area. It often causes queues to go way back down the Petersham Road, and having been here when it through the change, it goes back to when the parking was changed in the High Street, whatever that was, 6 years ago, 8 years ago. Because now the buses can no longer take an oblique angle on occasions, they have to jink round the cars. Sometimes they can't jink round the cars, and so they stop. And as soon as one bus stops, if you have a walk around and watch it, that traffic goes back and over the bridge in, seems like seconds. Okay. It would need a fundamental change and a loss of parking slots. But if your people are concerned with congestion, and they are concerned with the quality of the air, and all of these other things, it needs a pretty bold approach to it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Speaker.
I hear what you say, and I'm regularly stuck in traffic, but I don't have an easy solution. If we take away the parking, we're condemning some of those businesses. So there isn't an easy solution. It's a case of trying to find a balance.
It's absolutely not true. Cars go and park in those spaces, and they'll be there 2-3 hours later. And if you get a ticket and you work it out, it's cheaper to stick it there and have a ticket, and then than it is to go off and try and cruise around and do it. It's just, it is not for the shops. People park there and stay there for hours.
I mean, provided they're paying the price, then in a sense it's difficult to do anything there. But we could, I suppose, look at the pricing in the parking area and see whether or not there is a rotation. So conducting some sort of survey is a possibility if that is an issue. It's not one that I'm aware of.
1 or 2 shops are more important than the health caused by the health, and it's almost certainly diesel, and buses are diesels. But what is more important? The health of your citizens or the convenience of 1 or 2 people going to a shop? To me, it's a pretty simple question.
Well, I was going to say, is your concern the congestion itself, or do you want to see the traffic moving faster through the area?
It's the same thing.
But the fumes and the pollution and so on, if you've got more traffic passing through, you've got more opportunities for pollution somewhere. So
that's not true. Cars pollute least at 30 miles an hour, because that 30 miles is not on. 30 miles an hour is the speed at which they're measured according to European legislation. So any time a car slows down or speeds up, it pollutes more. So slowing the cars down will A, increase the time they're around, and B, increase the amount of pollution they're putting out. So you get a double hit. It's worse off.
Okay, so the challenge is sort of parking versus traffic flow.
Yeah, Stephen can come back on the technicals, but I mean, this is actually, here you all are. So far what we've got, you're the beginning of the critical mass, which is what I hope will be the East Twickenham village plan. So do we stick in there that people want? We've heard a lot this evening, people are desperate to improve the shops, to help the shops, to raise. You, Sarah, saying, well, that's perhaps something that should go slightly less important, and we should keep the traffic moving and take out some of the parking spaces that people need. We'll have to look at the specifics on the use of those bays. I've already revealed that I come home on the train and watch people going into Tesco. Well, in the morning, when I go to the town hall, I go on the 33 bus every morning, so I don't have a car. I think public transport is perfectly reasonable for London. So I know precisely what you mean and the way it backs up. We can stick that on the board and the consultation, see what people think about us, measure your view against the view maybe of others, and that's really what this process is about. Finding where the community wants to put that balance. But on the specifics, I thought we could look at the usage of those days, couldn't we?
Yes, I think we could, and the turnover of the days, I think, is the key point. Yeah.
Okay, many thanks. There was a gentleman over there. Yes, with a hand up. Your question.
Thank you. You referred once or twice during the course of your answers to the specific, detailed local knowledge of the council's officers. With the impending amalgamation of council services with Wandsworth Borough, would there not be at least some dilution of that local knowledge? Would that not impact adversely on the development and implementation of this village plan and indeed any other localised village plan?
It's a very fair question. I should say first at the start that we're not merging services with Wandsworth. We're merging management, so starting from a shared chief executive and down. Because we believe that there are certain things across two councils managing certain things together could do it more cheaply. I mean, I don't want to pick out, don't want to pick out any individual, but say if each council had a director of sideboard varnishing, to use some completely bizarre example. It could be we could manage with one director of sideboard varnishing between the two if that person is paid 130,000, 120,000 a year or whatever. So the idea is by pooling back office, all those functions so far as possible, that we'll be able to preserve the frontline services. And actually the kind of people that walk the streets and clear the rubbish and should be the eyes of the council, and some of the people who work at the more front-end technical level, they may be impacted less, but I'm not making any forecasts. The reality is that since this meeting started, 1.5 hours, the country's gone another £16 million into debt. Money which we're borrowing from the Chinese and the Arabs, or else printing money to keep going. So it's an illusion to think that there's suddenly going to be a 5th Cavalry money tree that's going to come along. So we've got to find ways to do the best more cheaply, and that's, we think we can save up to £10 million from those back office starting. What you say is perfectly true. There will be a risk of some loss certainly there will be a loss of management capacity. It may be that when I want to have the chief executive and say, do that, which I don't do that very often, but occasionally, that chief executive will be there for 2.5 days rather than 5 days. So, but if we can save £10 million, which doesn't have to be taken out of frontline services, then hopefully we can keep some of that sort of street cred down. The other thing, of course, trying to look forward, which I always try to look forward, is that the public sector can't do everything. And whether I want to try and bring, somebody was talking about earlier about how volunteers can help. I don't want to say that, we want to shuffle off our responsibilities. But if we can do more, we can be, you can be good collective eyes and ears for us about what's going on. If we can create that sort of new partnership of doing things, we may be able to keep things done not just by having to send off a council employee. I just won't say any more, but I would just underline the respect that I have for people who work. I do not like people criticising council officers. Council officers make mistakes like anybody else. But public service is an extraordinarily high ideal. My brother spent his whole life in local government. My uncle, when he came out of the Air Force after the war, spent his whole life in local government. I've got an infinite respect for people, so I'm not in the business of saying we've got to get rid of officers to save things. But what we're trying to do is to find ways of keeping the show on the road as the amount of resource in the public sector sinks. So the answer to the question is, I admit there may well be some loss, but hopefully we can build up this kind of process under the eyes and ears of the community. But we're not sharing services. We will be Richmond Council. Decisions will be made by Richmond councillors on what the services we are have in Richmond. You will elect the Richmond councillors and boot them out if they don't keep the spirit of Richmond right. And services will be provided on the ground for Richmond according to our specification.
Many thanks. Gentlemen at the front, you have a question.
I missed the beginning.
The microphone. Thank you.
I missed the beginning, so I hope this isn't repetition. I noticed that there is some traffic monitoring equipment on Richmond Bridge at the moment, and I wondered why and whether there are any immediate plans for maintenance which may or may not close the bridge, and what effect the lorries that might be servicing Lidl thundering over the bridge, if indeed they do come that way, would have on the lifetime of the maintenance.
Okay, many thanks. Councillor, the monitoring equipment, are you...
I'm not aware of that equipment, so I mean, if you could describe it, I can try and sort of tubes. Then they're counting the number of vehicles going over. But I'm not aware of any sort of immediate plans for maintenance. So, and equally, the impact of trucks going over. I mean, the bridge is built to a certain specification. I don't know. I don't have the answer as to whether or not the frequency of the trucks going over would be a problem for it.
It's a very old bridge.
It is a very old bridge.
If it had to close, it would be a nightmare.
Absolutely.
And if these huge lorries, and I don't know if they'll come that way, create a situation, I'd like to know that Lidl or whoever is responsible for it bear some of the cost.
I mean, that would be part and parcel, as I mentioned earlier, of that delivery plan. They would have to tell us what routes they were taking to get to the store.
There will be a delivery plan, if there were one, which will lay down specifications as to the whens and actually what type of lorry actually. And this Tesco case I was talking about, there was a specification that these massive pantechnicons wouldn't be able to come. But obviously Payne's Bridge is the most beautiful bridge in London, as well as the oldest. It's of supreme architectural importance, and we all love it. And it's actually should be the symbol of our borough, really, because it unites Twickenham and Richmond. So we've certainly got big lorries thundering over it, I hope. And TfL, we have a similar view.
Okay, I've got two, are these on this point, Philippa? There's a strict weight limit on the bridge.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So that would be enforced anyway. So go on this point, okay, and then the lady at the back.
If somebody is counting the traffic on Richmond Bridge and the council do not know who's doing it, is it possible to find out who's doing it? Because it would be interesting to know.
I'm not saying the council doesn't know, I'm saying I don't know. So, they do count over the borough frequently.
Believe it or not, Councillor Sleek doesn't spend all his time watching screens and moving around the counters. That's one of our officers are constantly monitoring the movements of traffic around the borough. So just something we do all the time, but we individually wouldn't know what was happening where.
Okay, there was it a supplementary question just behind you there?
Sorry, I couldn't hear what Philippa was saying, but I understood that there was in fact a weight restriction.
There is, yes. She was precisely making that point.
So I presume we can count on you to see that that's enforced.
Absolutely so. Totally, 100%.
Okay, thank you very much. We had some more questions here. So I've got Sue. I think there were two questions at the back, so I'll take that.
I have to confess to being absolutely newcomer to the area, so thank you very much for hosting this. And I've been humbled by the amount of knowledge and passion that there is for the community. I'm going to bring it back to the schools question because as someone who hopes to stay in the area for quite some time to come, it's going to directly affect myself and my partner. You very elegantly dodged the question of the alternative arrangements if the Lidl site were not to come to fruition. I understand why you might have done that. I know you said that there were alternative arrangements, but I wondered what they were, and the reason I'm asking is because I'm concerned that if we become over-focused on that site and it then doesn't come off, we may have missed the opportunity to explore the other alternatives as a community.
No, I can't for various reasons. I mean, maybe we could explore, but we do look at sites throughout the area. There are alternatives that we have looked at and considered. Mainly there are businesses there at the moment. So there's nothing that I can come out and say publicly, well, it's this site or this site, that I would want to do that at the moment. But the options do get more difficult after Ride House. But we are looking at those options and have identified them, and we will have to then take them to the next step. Should, in the short term, these discussions, and I think it is short term for these to be concluded one way or the other, not come through.
We are very closely in touch with the government, and as I was saying earlier that obviously the government, in terms of free schools and new schools, has a very strong hand. And I did say, and it's the case, that the Minister himself is certainly aware that this is an area of concern. And again, I don't want to give away too much, but I have indicated, and my officers weren't very pleased about it, that in certain circumstances we've been prepared to help the government, in a sense, because the government that tends to acquire, the government will be acquiring the little site because they have an interest in it, not us. But I have said, perhaps rather rashly, that because schools are so fundamental that we might be able to consider to some degree kind of oiling the wheel a bit. But it's a very much a live thing at the moment, because commercial interests are involved. It's quite difficult to speak.
Sorry, I don't mean to dodge the question, but equally I can't name sites that can run that state.
And the case in my ward, which I described, was actually, we suggested 3 sites to government, as a matter of fact, because Sheen is an area a bit like this, which is very under-schooled. And the government came up with a 4th one, which we hadn't even thought about, funny enough, a disused church. So it may be that, out of left field or right field, or whatever you want to call it, someone might come up with a suggestion that we haven't thought about. Could be someone in this room's got a good suggestion. We're very much active on the case.
Okay, many thanks. Question from Sue at the front here, then, please. And do we have other questions? I've got to see a show of hands. We've got other people wanting to ask things and make comments. Okay, no more hands. Okay, Sue.
I wanted to ask some more about how you're planning to involve people in the village plan. Because I can see in this room people I recognise from the committees I sit on, the meeting association. So it's a big, round up of the usual suspects. And this is desirable that the process should reach out to other people. And I was wondering what you had learned from the process elsewhere about how to do it, because it's incredibly difficult. But it would be good for us as the sort of local activists to actually feel there are more people supporting anything that happens, and also actually involve more people in this committees and meetings we all sit on. It'd be great to have other people doing that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the whole purpose of the village plan, is that it is about involving everyone. That was how we started it all off with the all-in-one survey, by sending every household a survey and asking them to identify their area and their priorities and what they liked about their local area. And so we continued. The dropping, this will start. Unfortunately, because of the general election and purdah, following on, we would normally have had this leaders' question time, and then followed on in a couple of weeks' time by a drop-in consultation event. But we can't do that because by the time we get to the consultation, we'll be in Purda. So I can't actually remember the date, but we'll make sure you're notified. Have you got it? Of when we actually start the East Twickenham drop-in consultation. And we circulate, every single household in the area gets a leaflet about that drop-in consultation. And that's when people can come and talk to the consultants about the planning aspects. They can then talk to people about the village plan or post-it notes and their ideas. So there's an opportunity for everybody to get involved in that. And indeed on the walkabouts, because people are told on that leaflet about the walkabouts as well. We have had a variety. It isn't always just the usual suspects who come on walkabouts. It has attracted people, particularly, you know, if they've got a road that they're very interested in, can care about. Following that, there is then what I would call there's a public consultation, and so everybody can contribute to that. Then there is a stakeholder event, which is more for the community groups, to look at the feedback from the consultations, in fact, and to try to come up with some ideas. Then a draft supplementary planning document, and the feedback from the village plan goes again out to public consultation. Again, there's a public drop-in. So there is a lot, and as allied to that, we do try to do some events with what I would call the harder to reach groups, special targeted events, of course, you know, we rely on you to put it out to your networks as well, through emails and things so that people know. So the more people that know about it, the more people pass it on, that's what we want. But the idea is to get as many people involved as possible.
I mean, it's one of the loveliest lines from the cinema, isn't it? Claude Rains, round up the usual suspects. But who's going to criticise the usual suspects? Thank God for the usual suspects who do so much, and we know already thanks so many people in the voluntary sector. But of course we want to get more people involved. That's really what I'd like this thing to be about. It's not about sort of any political party or politics. I just think it's terribly important that people should feel that they matter and they have influence and that we talk to each other, please. So I think the usual suspects can help very much in spreading the word. And I would also say, sort of saying, let's be cynical about things. So easy to be cynical. I'm not sort of some starry-eyed idealist. I know how difficult things are, but if we can talk to each other, share ideas, the dialogue about, you know, do we want to have those parking places there, or how can we improve the street scene, we might be able together to make the world a better place. And if people think that somebody's listening out there, then more people will come in. When we had the first conference in Twickenham, I called it the Barefoot Conference, in a rather sort of 60s phrase that nobody really understood. But the idea was, no, they didn't, all the youngsters, I'm afraid. But the idea was anybody just come in and they could stick up their eye, post it on the wall, or say into a microphone what they felt about it. And people like that. We've got so many ideas for Twickenham. Now, it gets not so many coming in these smaller local villages, but as Pamela said, there will be posted opportunities and other things there. And please encourage people to come forward with ideas. Not everything will happen at once, some things may never be possible, but you know, let's try and collect the hopes of the community. So usual suspects, please come.
Well, can we make sure that whatever the plan is for the public, it does actually include key points, things like the summer fair, yes, well, how do we analyse this as to that? So, you know, like areas that will attract people.
Can you hold the microphone up?
Summer fair.
So this was, Sue was saying that can the village plan include things like the summer fair in it?
They're spreading the word,
Because I can't remember how many people we think came last time.
We think over 2,000.
Over 2,000. So if you divide 2,000 by the field, that's where we need to have. We already had it. I'm sure you know, but obviously it makes sense for me.
Yeah, well, we had a community engagement team there last year and indeed the year before, and that proved to be very effective. We also had some of the reports that people had already had about the street scene there last time. And actually, I've just found the date. It's the 17th of May of the East Twickenham walk around, so put it in your diaries and make sure as many people as possible know about it, because that will be your opportunity to show us all the things that you've been talking about tonight.
Do you know the timings on that? Is that too early to say?
I don't have the timings, I'm afraid, but it's
Sunday, 17th of May. If you have your name on the sheet that has been around, then you'll be
told directly and individually, yeah.
And I mean, we're also, I know, having a stand of information at the Richmond Mayfair, and I'm sure a lot of East Twickenham people probably come over to Richmond Mayfair. No? Oh,
Would you like to have a stand at the East Twickenham Sunday on June the 21st?
Yes, we will.
Yes,
We will be there.
There we go, great stuff. Thank you very much. Any other questions or points that you want to make? Lady behind you there. Thank you.
Can I just say, you probably well there is a place in Rosslyn Road called Etna, which is the local community centre. It's desperately in need of some TLC, and I think if it doesn't get some soon, the whole place is going to collapse. So I don't know whether you can put that into your plan as well, please, whilst you're at it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're very aware of it. Actually, we've got the chair of the trustees here, Michael is here. It actually has had quite a lot of TLC from the council over the years. We've had new boilers and new windows, but it's actually absolutely very high on our priority, and it's something that the council has supported for a long time and will continue to do.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no other comments, then it falls to me to thank you all very much indeed for coming along tonight and for your contribution. Perhaps we could show our appreciation for the councillors that are giving up their evening as well.
And also for our chairman, thank you for
Please get involved, keep an eye out for things going on to keep involved in the conversation. I'm off to prepare my application for the Director of Sideboard Varnishing.